North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary. That is not news. Commentary is opinion, both yours and mine. We share them, and so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. When I say we, I'm talking about our executive producer, Dirk Steele from Denver, Colorado. And we are talking about the nature of the Wells Report. And the nature of the Wells Report is not a political broadcast, but a lot of people think it is. And the reason they think it is because we argue the Constitution. There is a political bias. It's based on the Constitution. Not based on Republican, not based on Democrat, not based on conservative so much, but certainly not based on progressive liberalism. What we do is we report the news factually, but all the news is political. And so when you're arguing the Constitution, the precepts, etc. of the Constitution, and there are political factions on both sides that are decidedly trying to do away with the Constitution because, as the Constitution is designed, it gets in the way of federal government. And they don't want that obstruction. And so when you argue the Constitution, you find yourself arguing against politics, and therein lies partisanship. And that's not what we're trying to do here. But as we go into the 2024 presidential cycle, the presidential election cycle, how do you avoid politics? What I want to make clear in this is the Wells Report is a news broadcast where we come together. Will politics engage itself in that particular discussion? Of course it will. But this is not an overtly political show. It is an overtly constitutional show. And that's what we're working to do here. Just to define the broadcast right off the top. Now, the reason I bring that up is because that's not what the mainstream media does. There are big stories in the United States. Specifically, there is a great deal of concern and interest around what appear to be miscreant financial dealings of the Biden administration. Well, the mainstream media will not cover that story. 0 minutes. And that's not just the only story they do it with. When Donald Trump speaks, they turn their backs and walk away. We do not do that. As we reported yesterday, virtually in real time, President Trump was arraigned in federal court, the first president to ever have to go through that. And then he spoke in Bedminster, New Jersey. And so I started looking around to try to find the coverage of that speech. Fox News, nothing on the front page. USA Today had something on the front page, but one story. There were other Trump stories, but they really didn't have anything to do about anything else. And so, where do you go to see that speech? If you missed it last night, you come here because we have the speech, and we're going to show it to you right this very minute because President Trump, former President Trump, makes amazing assertions in that speech, and they are essential for the people of the United States. Not necessarily from a protection of President Trump, but something else that Dirk and I discussed today, and that is protection of the presidency. And that's a completely different kettle of fish. This is President Trump from last night as he was speaking to a crowd outside the Bedminster National Golf Course that also bears his name, President Trump.
Today we witness the most evil and heinous abuse of power in the history of our country. Very sad thing to watch. A corrupt sitting president had his top political opponent arrested on fake and fabricated charges of which he and numerous other presidents would be guilty. Right in the middle of a presidential election in which he is losing very badly. This is called election interference and yet another attempt to rig and steal a presidential election. More importantly, it's a political persecution like something straight out of a fascist or communist nation. This day will go down in infamy, and Joe Biden will forever be remembered as not only the most corrupt president in the history of our country, but perhaps even more importantly, the president who, together with a band of explosives, thugs, misfits, and Marxists, tried to destroy American democracy. But they will fall, and we will win bigger and better. Charging a former president of the United States under the Espionage Act of 1917 wasn't meant for this. An act for a crime so heinous that only the death penalty would do, and threatening me with 400 years in prison for possessing my own presidential papers, which just about every other president has done, is one of the most outrageous and vicious legal theories ever put forward in an American court of law. The Espionage Act is believed to go after traitors and spies. It has nothing to do with a former president legally keeping his own documents. As president, the law that applies to this case is not.
If you're over 40 with heart issues or clogged arteries, I need you to hold your breath
Oh,
for 1 minute.
my goodness.
Listen.
You've got to be kidding me.
The Espionage Act, but very simply the Presidential Records Act, which is not even mentioned in this ridiculous 44-page indictment. Under the Presidential Records Act, which is civil, not criminal, I had every right to have these documents. The crucial legal precedent is laid out in the most important case ever on the subject, known as the Clinton Socks case. You know what that means? After leaving the White House, Bill Clinton kept 79 videotapes in the sock drawer. They included discussions of U.S. military involvement in Haiti, discussions of U.S. foreign policy, both defense and offense, and Cuba, recordings of President Clinton's conversations with all of the many foreign leaders at the time. Think of that. Sensitive facts about trade negotiations taken from presidential briefings, discussions with the Secretary of State about conflict in Bosnia, and much, much more. Very big stuff. Not only was Bill Clinton never even considered for a criminal prosecution based on the tapes he took, but when he was sued for them, who would face? Judge Amy Berman Jackson's decision states under the statutory scheme established by the Presidential Records Act, the decision to segregate personal materials from presidential records is made by the president during the president's term and in the president's sole discretion. You're surprised to hear that, aren't you? Any normal administration, even an opposing one, would consider that to be the end, but not the corrupt Biden administration. Scott's decision, as it's known, also states, quote, the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, does not have the authority to designate material as presidential records. I don't have the authority. NARA does not have the tapes in question, and NARA lacks any right, duty, or means to seize control of them. This is law. The president enjoys unconstrained authority to make decisions regarding the disposal of documents. That's unconstrained to make that decision. Neither the archivist nor Congress has the authority to veto the president's decision. The Presidential Records Act does not confer any mandatory or even discretionary authority on the archivist to classify records. Under the statute, this responsibility is left solely to the President of the United States. Think of that. That's the decision. Think of that. Now, just think of that. In other words, whatever documents the president decides to take with him, he has the right to do so. It's an absolute right. This is the law. And that is something that people have now seen, and it couldn't be more clear. They ought to drop this case immediately because they're destroying the country. And this is why no other president, even those who kept far more documents than I, has ever been even investigated, let alone charged with a crime. Because the indictment put forward by the Biden administration included staged photographs of boxes at Mar-a-Lago. Many people have asked me why you had these boxes. Why did you want them? The answer, in addition to having every right under the Presidential Records Act, is that these boxes were containing all types of personal belongings, everything, shirts and shoes, everything. It can be seen in the picture where someone not me, I wonder who it might have been, dumped one of the very neatly arranged boxes all over the floor. They were full of newspapers, press clippings, thousands of pictures, thousands and thousands of White House pictures. The White House photographers, today. They took so many pictures and saved all of them in those boxes. Clothing, memorabilia, and much, much more. I hadn't had a chance to go through all the boxes. It's a long, tedious job. It's a long time. Which I was prepared to do, but I have a very busy life. I've had a very busy life. I make it more busy because you're always exciting. And under the Sox decision, there seemed to be no rush. I wasn't in a rush because that decision was law. The other picture that was so wild, you remember that one, was angry and corrupt because the photo staged by the FBI. And those who raided Mar-a-Lago, they were putting documents all over the floor. Remember the famous picture? All over, it said confidential, said presidential, said all sorts of things. And it's supposed to be there like, it's that way when they raided, it wasn't that way. They put them there, took the picture and released it illegally to the press. They took my medical records, my passport, my birth certificate, and apologized. They even brought a safecracker. This is a professional safecracker they brought into Mar-a-Lago. And they broke into my safe, and you know what they found? Nothing. There was nothing there. And zero. According to the Presidential Records Act,
Ever wonder about the legal ramifications of using your hands?
This gives us an opportunity to stop the silly ham-fisted insertion of commercials on YouTube. Now, there is something we need to talk about here, okay? Here's what we need to talk about. You will notice that YouTube is covering President Trump. This represents kind of an amazing sea change in their policy. I found this video on Trump. Remember, I've been going through trying to find conservative-based video that won't be shown on mainstream media so that you can see it. But YouTube wouldn't carry it. And so I'd have to go to all kinds of arcane places to find this. Well, that's not the case now. And oh, by the way, it's also not the case that they're continue to censor this broadcast. Things are changing at Google. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report. We'll return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Good morning. Good morning. It's Wednesday, June 14th, year of our Lord 2023. We are playing the speech of President Trump from last night from Bedminster, New Jersey. And we're doing that because you can't find it in most places. We found it on YouTube, and I brought this up. YouTube has changed its policies, and that is good for everyone. There's a conversation going on. This is we save these segments for conversations between us. When we're playing long-form speeches or long-form circumstances, we stop so that we can intercede and talk a little bit about what we see. Let's see. Mr. Love says the Presidential Records Act, he actually made a typo. The Presidential Records Act does allow the president to take whatever documents. Now, he amended that to doesn't. It does, actually. And that's according to an Obama-appointed judge regarding Bill Clinton. And these are mementos. These are personal records, even the classified ones. Now, you don't have to agree with that. You don't. But that's one of the things that's going to happen in this, if it goes to trial, this upcoming trial in federal court in Miami with President Trump involved. They're going to define what the limits of the Presidential Records Act are. Now, this hasn't been an issue until it became a political one because, oh, wait a minute, we can nail President Trump on this, even though every other president in the history of the United States has done it. All of them have. As a matter of fact, in this speech, you're going to hear, and this is one of the reasons why we're running it, there is a litany of what presidents gone before Trump have done with these papers. And certainly, some of these stories, if true, strike at the very heart of obstruction of justice. And that's in this speech. We're going to get back to it here in just a couple of moments. So let's talk a little bit about it. According to an Obama-era judge talking about Bill Clinton, that those papers are, including the government ones, including the ones that are even classified, those belong to the president. They would have to. They are mementos. Now, there's also a part of this process having to do with the National Archives that has been distorted to try to come up with a political issue against President Trump. There is another part of this where there's give and take between the ex-presidents. Hey, we can't let you have this paper. Can't do it. We can't let you have it, so bring it back to us. Oh, okay. Well, is there a redacted version that I can keep? And that give and take was what was going on with President Trump. The reason President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home was raided was because he had information regarding the investigation into January 6th. He kept it because it was exculpatory. In other words, it was evidence to the benefit of him. And he had already learned that getting exculpatory evidence from the FBI was near impossible because of obstruction from the FBI toward virtually anybody that they don't want to have they don't want to have any kind of evidentiary information. And we've seen that again regarding this 1023 regarding the financial dealings of Joe Biden. And so it wasn't necessarily the classified information that they were after for the FBI. It was political information, and there really can't be much of an argument against that based on what we've seen regarding this 1023. These pieces are arcane. They are difficult to follow. But when it came out that there was an actual declassification document regarding the FBI investigation into January 6th, the FBI jumped all over it and raided his house. They didn't want him to have those documents. They don't want the American people to have any documents whatsoever that may be at odds with their politics, which is the problem in toto. That's the way I see it. Just my opinion. What about yours? 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Back with more in just a couple of moments. More of the Bedminster speech from last night from former President Trump as we continue on the Wells Report. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. Hi, my name is John David Wells. We are covering President Trump's speech. We started with YouTube because it was so novel that YouTube had this speech on their platform. That's something they normally just don't do. Well, they've changed their policies, and that's a good thing, I think. We'll see. So what we've done is we've switched the speech. Some of this may be repetitive because I was not able, because of technical issues, not able to find the exact part of the speech where President Trump left off. But going to C-SPAN now, we thank them very much for their video. We also thank YouTube for the video at the beginning, even though the audio was junk. And so what we'll do is we'll return to President Trump from Bedminster, New Jersey.
And under the Sox decision, there seemed to be no rush. I wasn't in a rush because that decision was a law. The other picture that was so vile, you remember that one? It was angry and corrupt, was the photo staged by the FBI. And those that raided Mar-a-Lago, they were putting documents all over the floor. Remember that famous picture? All over, said confidential, said presidential, said all sorts of things. And it was supposed to be there like it was that way when they raided. It wasn't that way. They put them there, took the picture and released it illegally to the press. They took my medical records, my passport, my birth certificate, and apologized. They even brought a safe cracker. This is a professional safe cracker. They put it into Mar-a-Lago. And they broke into my safe. And you know what they found? Nothing. There was nothing there. Nothing there. And zero. According to the Presidential Records Act, which...
And there was a technical issue. Hang on just a minute as I try to figure that one out. As suddenly the video stopped. And this is from C-SPAN. That's very strange. All right, let me see what we got here. Why in heaven's name was that the case? Let me see what we got here. Let me work this through. And I think this is, let's try it one more time here. Whoa!
Fiverr present.
Sorry about that. That was probably pretty loud in your ear holes. Please forgive me. All right, here we go. And let's bring back the president. God willing, it'll work. Nope. Okay, that's not what we have here. Let's see if this is. Well, we have to find this thing again here. Yeah, here we go. Let's do this. And here's the president.
And Sebastian, you covered very well, I must say. Very well. I'm not the one who thinks I'm above the law. I'm the one that followed the law. I'm the only one. It's Joe Biden and his corrupt Department of Injustice who think they are above the law. Never before have the two standards of justice in our country been more starkly revealed. Joe Biden had troves of classified documents from his time as vice president and even as a senator, which was completely and totally illegal. In fact, other senators heard about it. Dick Durbin heard about it. You have to see his response. There's no way that's totally illegal. Took him as a senator out of a skiff. They were shocked when they found out. They actually thought it was impossible to do. Biden sent 1,850 boxes to the University of Delaware, making the search very, very difficult for anybody. And he refuses to give them up. And he refuses to let people even look at them. And then they say how he's behaving so nicely. Many of Biden's classified documents were in Chinatown, D.C., Chinatown, which is shocking considering his family receives so much money from China. I wonder how many times the friends of ours from China reviewed those documents. Chinatown, D.C. Others were unsecured at his so-called Penn Biden Center in Washington, which paid Biden approximately $1 million a year. The money supposedly coming from China, and still other classified documents were strewn all over his garage floor, where his now famous Corvette is stored. He's so proud of that car. There was no security, and the door was left open most of the time. It was open. All of those classified documents, all of those documents strewn all over the floor, piled up like junk. Unlike me, who had absolute declassification authority as president, Joe Biden as vice president had no authority to declassify and no right to possess the documents. He had no right. Instead of falling under the Presidential Records Act, Biden's actions fell under a much stricter Federal Records Act, which has very, very tough criminal penalties. Yet nothing happens to Crooked Joe. Nothing happened. Have you heard anything about the big search for his documents? No, only me. Most infamously of all, Hillary Clinton set up an illegal private server in her basement. You never heard this story. With the deliberate intention of violating public information laws so she could hide her pay-for-play scandals at the Clinton foundations or whatever. Hillary stored vast quantities of classified and sensitive information on her illicit server. Some of it happened to leak. It leaked into Anthony Weiner's computer. Remember Anthony Weiner? Into his computer. You don't want to be on his computer. And all of it was illegal because thankfully she was never president. She didn't have the powers to declassify. Thank you. Thank you. She didn't have the powers to declassify. The difference, and neither did Joe. Joe didn't have your mind. A little bit cooler than it was. It's pretty hot out here. Thank you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Great birthday.
You're watching coverage from C-SPAN of President Trump.
Nice birthday, isn't it?
Last night, he had Bedminster National Golf Club. And we're bringing this to you courtesy of C-SPAN. We want to thank them very much for first putting this speech up and second allowing us to use it this afternoon.
Nice birthday. Wonderful birthday. They were saying happy birthday. I was with Eric and Laura, the kids. Happy birthday, Grandpa. Happy. And I said, oh, great. I just got charged with, they want 400 years approximately. If you add them all up, a fake 400 years. Oh, thank you, darling. That's so nice. It's a wonderful birthday. We're going to make it into the greatest birthday of all. We'll make it into the greatest of all. When caught, Hillary then deleted and acid washed. Nobody does that because of the expense, but it's pretty conclusive. 33,000 emails in defiance of a congressional subpoena already launched. The subpoena was there, and she decided to delete, acid wash, and then smash and destroy her cell phones with a hammer. And then they say, I participated in obstruction? Now think of it. That's called obstruction. There's never been obstruction as grave as that. She did this in the face of everything, and yet nobody did anything about it. The FBI and the DOJ protected her, did not issue subpoenas, did not use a grand jury, did not execute search warrants, and then the corrupt head of the FBI, James Comey, declared no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case. Can you believe it?
All right. So this is tiresome. This is also something that I haven't seen before, but I did notice that when I mentioned C-SPAN, suddenly we started having issues, and I'm very concerned about that. So let's go back to where we were if we can. And this means this video starts over again. So please forgive me while we deal with this. This is something that, like I said, is pretty tiresome and borderline annoying-ish. So let's see if this might be the spot, because this is the part of the video that I wanted you to hear. This is the litany of these other presidents and secretaries of state and their use of classified documents. Let me sneak this up a little bit.
33,000 emails in defiance of a congressional subpoena already launched. The subpoena was there, and she decided to delete, acid wash, and then smash and destroy her cell phones with a hammer. And then they say, I participated in obstruction? Now think of it. That's called obstruction. There's never been obstruction as grave as that. She did this in the face of everything, and yet nobody did anything about it. The FBI and the DOJ protected her, did not issue subpoenas, did not use a grand jury, did not execute search warrants, and then the corrupt head of the FBI, James Comey, declared no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case. Can you believe it? And that was just one of many items. Hillary Clinton broke the law, and she didn't get indicted. Joe Biden broke the law, and in many other ways we're finding out, and so far has not gotten indicted. I did everything right, and they indicted me. But, you know, we're serving as a great example. In the case of Bill Clinton's national security advisor, remember that? Sandy Berger. He was caught stealing classified documents from the National Archives, very big ones, very important ones, by stuffing them in his pants. That's pretty. And putting them also in his socks. And he destroyed them and cut the tape with scissors, cut them all up. What Berger did was highly illegal, but he was given nothing, no jail time, nothing happened. There are countless other examples. Bill Clinton, who I happen to like, hard to believe, right? Before I did this, I was actually quite friendly with him. Nice guy. They should have used him a little bit more as an advisor on the 2016 election. He said, you know, you better get to Wisconsin, you're going to lose. No, we're not. You better get to Michigan, you're going to lose. No, we're not. They did. Bill Clinton lost the nuclear codes, and absolutely nothing was done. He lost the nuclear codes. The George W. Bush White House lost 22 million emails, a record. NARA cannot assure complete transfer of any of the Bush records. A document shredding truck was spotted on the way to Dick Cheney's house. Can you imagine? Hillary Clinton took hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of furniture, china, flatware, rugs, and more from the White House, and she wasn't prosecuted. How about that one? She took the furniture and the china. How about if Trump did that? You think Trump would have a little problem? The horrific violations of my rights by crooked Joe Biden's weaponized Department of Injustice are unthinkable. It's unthinkable what's happened. So bad for our country. Democrats all, they lawlessly pierced my attorney-client privilege with lawyers. What they did to lawyers, what they have done to our lawyers, all of our lawyers, they've done things that were absolutely horrible and unthinkable. The leaking has been unbelievable and highly illegal. They leak. We've learned more from the Washington Post, New York Times, about the DOJ's Boxes hoax, and from prosecutors themselves. We want to read about it. You pick up the Washington Post, which is not doing well. You pick up the New York Times. They'll do better now because of these things. It's the only way they survive. They'll end up dying. It's not supposed to be that way. We don't want to learn from the Times. We don't want to learn from leaks. We want to learn from the people we're supposed to learn from. It's like a leaking sieve in Washington. But we learned nothing about the Biden bribery scheme or special counsel Robert Hur's investigation. Robert Hur is doing the Biden investigation. He's a very respected, very nice person. Very nice person. Mine's not such a nice person. Mine's a deranged lunatic, which are many times the magnitude of ours in both number and severity. That's the prosecutor that they gave. He has found nothing. He totally exonerated Mike Pence. I'm happy about that. Mike did nothing wrong, but he happened to have classified documents in his house. But they exonerated him, and Biden is a different story. I mean, so much. You have to really think about what I said. As a senator, he took all of those documents. It's unprecedented. The prosecutor in the case, I will call it our case, is a thug. I've named him Deranged Jack Smith. I wonder what his name used to be, Jack Smith. It sounds so innocent, doesn't it? Jack Smith. What's his name? Jack Smith. He's a very nice man.
You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. What is your opinion? This speech continues here. We've got a few more minutes of it, but you did notice the litany of people who came before President Trump and the way they were handled with regards to classified documents. Is this fair in anyone's mind? If so, please, by all means, say so. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. This is the Wells Report for the 14th day of June, 2023. Thanks very much for being with us today as we bring you President Trump's speech, former President Trump's speech from last night. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. We will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. John David Wells, thank you very much for being a part of that. And we are going to continue with President Trump's speech from Bedminster, New Jersey last night.
He's a behind-the-scenes guy, but his record is absolutely atrocious. He does political hit jobs. He's been known to viciously arrest a certain governor. You know the governor, Bob McDonnell of Virginia, and absolutely ruined his life and the life of his family. All these wonderful family members, I knew them, only to have the case overturned 8-0 by the Supreme Court. He destroyed that man and he destroyed that family. And by the way, I will tell you, I'm here and I love you all and we can take it. But what these thugs have done to my family is a disgrace. I will tell you that. I say it to all of the fake news. There's a lot of it. What they did to my family and that young man right there, he's answered more subpoenas than any human being in the history of the world. And you know what? They have nothing after all of those subpoenas. Literally thousands of them. Congress, state councils, Mueller report, all of this. All he did is answer subpoenas all the time. At least he's become very experienced at that. Congratulations. But Eric is fantastic, and what he and Don, and Ivanka, and the whole group, it's what they've gone through, and these are serious people. These are serious people, but what he's done to my family, what they have done to my family is horrible. He also tried to railroad John Edwards on a completely bogus legal theory that didn't hold up in court. It's no wonder this raging lunatic was shipped off to The Hague to prosecute war criminals using globalist tribunals, not beholden to the Constitution or the rule of law. Two things Jack Smith clearly disdains. You take a look at this guy, he looks like a thug. But then I watched him make a speech the other day and he was trembling because it wasn't his territory. He feels much safer in the inner sanctums of the Department of Injustice, where he can be in his room and scream at people. He's a raging and uncontrolled Trump hater, as is his wife, who also happened to be the producer of that Michelle Obama puff piece. It was total puff piece. This is the guy I've got. Don't forget, this persecution is being done by the same weaponized agencies that for 7 years have been running illegal psychological warfare campaigns against the American people. Much as if they were trying to destabilize a foreign country. From the Russia hoax, to the no collusion Mueller witch hunt, to impeachment hoax number 1, impeachment hoax number 2, the 51 lying intelligence offers. How about them? They said it's Russia disinformation, and they knew it wasn't, which made about, according to some of the great pollsters that are right here, made from anywhere from a 10 to 17 point difference. And yet we still got more votes than any sitting president in history in the second election. And we actually did much better in the second election than we did in the first election. The fake dossier, paid for by the Democrats. How about the fake dossier? Remember that one? You think that was easy to go home and say, hello, darling, how are you, when they read about that? It wasn't easy at all. spying on my campaign. We caught them spying on my campaign. The FBI, Twitter files, and so much more. It's all been a battle of disinformation, one thing after the other, and all to protect the radical left misfits. It's also no coincidence that these charges against me came down the very same day. Evidence revealed Joe Biden took a $5 million bribe from Ukraine. Took a $5 million bribe. But the FBI and the Justice Department don't even want to talk about it. They showed something on television tonight. It had zero time on the three major networks, zero. But my impeachment had almost all the time. I think I had 351 minutes. They had no minutes. Okay? I think a lot of people are going to vote. Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to vote. I will tell you, I just left Miami, and I've never seen love in the streets like that. I've never seen it. We've seen a lot of love. I've never seen love like that because they know what we all go through. They know what we've gone through, and they see it, and they're smart. And, you know, many of those people coming from Cuba, Venezuela, other countries, they've seen this happening to their countries. I used to say that the United States, if it keeps going this way, it's going to be Venezuela on steroids. And now we're buying oil from Venezuela. Can you believe we have more liquid gold under our feet than any other nation, but we're buying tar from Venezuela, and we're refining it in Houston, the dirtiest, worst oil probably anywhere in the world, and we're refining it. So you can imagine what's going up in the air and our beautiful stuff we're not taking out of the ground and making a lot of money and paying off debt and reducing taxes still further, which we were in the process of doing. They want to distract from the real espionage and the real crime, so let's use President Trump to do so. Let's go out and let's indict President Trump so they don't talk about the $5 million bribe. Just yesterday, Senator Grassley revealed that the Burisma executive who allegedly paid the bribe reportedly has Crooked Joe on tape. They have 17 tapes, I understand. He must be a nice guy to deal with, right?
That is President Trump from last night at Bedminster, New Jersey. We'll pick that speech up when we come back after the top of the hour. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. Our telephone number, 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Looking forward to hearing from you as we continue on this 14th day of June. Back in a moment. And alrighty then. By the way, in case you're wondering, we're bringing something new to the Wells Report. You're not going to believe it. Maybe commercials. More about that later. Thanks for listening to the Wells Report, more of which continues in 6 minutes. You found the Wells Report, more of which continues in 5 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is The Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is The Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. You might be asking what we do here. We report the news. We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point that out. There is commentary. That's not news. Commentary is opinion, both yours and mine. And so we debate. And that debate can take place in a couple of places. You can join the chat room, which is on various platforms around the internet sphere. And you can also call me, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. This is the Wells Report. We're covering former President Trump's speech from last night at the Bedminster National Golf Course. And we're going to finish that up here, and then we're going to get to what you think about it also, and a little bit of analysis of it. And we'll move on to some other stories here that we have on the 14th day of June. This is the president from last night from the Bedminster Golf Course.
The guy from Burisma, nice company. They got him and Hunter on 17 different tapes, supposedly, but the FBI isn't showing them. Remember, they impeached me for asking a simple question about Biden's corrupt dealings in Ukraine, and now they see that once again, I was right. I was totally right. Joe Biden and the radical left can take foreign bribes and be totally protected. Republicans all, you must finally get tough. You've got to get tough. You got to get tough, and you got to show them. When you arrest your leading political opponent, we no longer have a democracy. When people are allowed to pour through our open borders and our elections are rigged, our country is in very serious trouble. When inflation is allowed to rage, when energy independence and dominance, we had independence and dominance. We were going to be soon very, very dominant. Within 6 months, we're going to dominate the whole world with energy, make a fortune. We were going to be paying off debt and lowering taxes at a level that nobody's ever seen. And they came in and they ended it. But when that's taken away from us, when interest rates and taxes spiral upward in an uncontrolled way, when murderers are allowed to roam, these are horrible killers, murderers are allowed to roam the streets of our Democrat-run cities unchecked, but the incompetent district attorney in New York indicts Trump for a crime that everybody agrees, every pundit, everybody, there is no crime. But murderers go out and nobody ever even comes and knocks on their door, and they know they're there, and they know their rooms, and they know their locations, and they're roaming our cities all over. And some of them are coming in right now through our borders. But then you have a nation that, as we are, is in serious, serious decline. We have a nation in serious decline. If the communists get away with this, it won't stop with me. They will not hesitate to ramp up their persecution of Christians, pro-life activists, parents attending school board meetings, and even future Republican candidates, which they do. We must end it permanently, and we must end it immediately. Now that the seal, so important, is broken. The seal is broken by what they've done. They should never have done this. This was an unwritten rule. You just don't, unless it's really bad. But you just don't. But the seal is now broken. In addition to closing the border and removing all of the criminal elements that have illegally invaded our country, making America energy independent and even dominant again, and immediately ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. I'll have it ended in 24 hours. I will appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States of America, Joe Biden, and the entire Biden crime family. Name a special prosecutor. And all others involved with the destruction of our elections, our borders, and our country itself. They're destroying our country. And when I'm reelected, and we will get reelected, we have no choice. We're not going to have a country anymore. I will totally obliterate the deep state. We will obliterate the deep state. And we know who they are. I know exactly who they are. They want to take away my freedom because I will never let them take away your freedom. It's very simple. They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you. They want you silent. And I am the only one that can save this nation because you know they're not coming after me. They're coming after you. And I just happen to be standing in their way, and I will never be moving. On November 5th, 2024, justice will be done. We will take back our country, and we will make America great again. Thank you. God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great job. Thank you.
President Trump from last night at the Bedminster National golf course, and I've got a lot of things to say about this speech, and I'm sure you do as well. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. One of the beauties of this broadcast, the way it is at this particular moment, is we can do things like this. What we can do is we can do long form coverage of the news. It's political, and this is not a political broadcast. It is a news broadcast. But there were many things in that speech that are essential for not just Trump fans or Trump voters to listen to. There are an awful lot of things in that speech that all Americans need to listen to. This is about an attack on the president. The former president referred to it as the seal has been broken. It's true. The seal has been broken. And it is something we are going to have to deal with for some years to come unless we, the people, demand otherwise. There was also something else about this particular speech that I want to bring up, and that was this was a much better presentation from President Trump. First of all, it was 32 minutes long. It wasn't an hour and a half. It wasn't a riffing from the hip. In other words, the president stuck to the script. I have long said that if President Trump wants to be the president of the United States after the 2024 election, he's going to have to start acting like a president. Now, I'm under no illusion that any of those words ever hit the president's ears, but what I can tell you is that this was a much more presidential Donald Trump. This is how you actually go about doing it. Small garnishments of wit, small garnishments of sarcasm, small garnishments scattered throughout a presentation sparingly. That allows President Trump to be President Trump. But straightforward recitation of fact as he sees them, and allowing the people of the United States to make their own decision about those points in his speeches is the way forward for President Trump, in my view. Telephone number is 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. What'd you hear in that speech? What did you hear? Like I said, I heard a better President Trump. Shorter, more concise. Facts as he sees them. And he put all that stuff out there and allowed the people of the United States, the people who actually viewed it, to be able to actually make up their minds. And that's something that we do on the Wells Report. I don't tell you what to think. I just present facts and you figure out what they mean. And that is the way news ought to be, in my view. And what I'm hoping is that you see it. Obviously you do, because you're here. So, the president issued a long litany of leftist politicians that have mishandled classified documents. He has pointed out several of his presidential predecessors in how they handled classified documents. And that is information that must be laid out there. Now, this takes us to the particular trial that the particular indictment and the arraignment that President Trump went through yesterday. And we have in this kind of a circumstance whereby the former president is getting into a position where the trial court that he will probably spend time in, although this may get tossed, I don't know yet. If it does get tossed, it goes immediately into the appeals process. I suspect the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals would then turn it back to the lower court for a redo, which would probably change the judge. So Judge Eileen Cannon is going to have to make some political decisions, which is one more signpost that our federal judiciary is political. If she believes she should be the judge on this case, and by the way, remember, this was an assignment that is random. If indeed this is the case, then this is going to be a long food fight. And what does that do? Well, that does exactly what happened during the Trump administration last time. A constant din of sabotage in the background based on different things, but still this constant thing that the president is going to have to deal with. This, I remember talking about this going into the 2016 election. We were talking about what kind of president we were going to need in these United States. Come on, mouth. In these United States. I was trying to figure out just exactly what kind of person that had to be. And what I said on stage in Dallas, Texas was, we're going to need a guy that can win a bar fight. And that is Donald Trump. Like him, don't like him. Agree with him, disagree with him. But there are certain things that cannot be turned aside when you think about what President Trump has done. He has exposed the mainstream media. He has exposed the deep state. He has exposed just exactly how deep and how stinky this Washington sewer actually is. The question is, will the American people respond? Because that response is not going to be based on traditional sources of fact, the mainstream media. The mainstream media, either side of that mainstream media, is in the bag for the left. I don't see how that benefits the United States of America. I just don't. And so what you have to do is you have to look for fact. What we've been doing in the Wells Report since its inception on 9/11/2001 is trying to report the facts fairly, honestly, and allowing the people of the United States to make their decisions. Now, is it working? Well, I'm not on television every night. Sure would like to be, but I'm not on television every night. And we have to build this. We have to build this broadcast. We have to build this, movement. It's not about politics. It's about truth. It's about truth and solutions, in fact. We have to identify, through fact, the truth. Then we have to provide solutions to the problems that are created when truth is ignored. And that is where we live in these United States. This is the Wells Report. Telephone number 817-379-2172. It's Wednesday. Let's talk. Back with more coming up in just a moment. Stay put. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. I like that piece of music. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. The chat room is not as great as it was yesterday, but it's moving on. Anne said this: Judge Eileen Cannon, according to the powers that be in the media, cannot preside over this trial because she was Trump appointed. And then Anne points out, but we're supposed to believe and back Christopher Wray, the current director of the FBI? Duh. He was also Trump appointed. Good point. One of the interesting things about this nation, there are two. One is a self-correcting mechanism. Two, there are checks and balances in our government. One of those checks and balances has been provided by Republican Senator J.D. Vance. He has now announced that he is going to hold up Department of Justice nominees in response to the Biden administration indictment of former President Donald Trump. Conservative radio host Mark Levin. Mark Levin. Kudos to J.D. Vance. See, I was thinking, I do shave the sides of my head. What I could do is I could shave the rest of my head, right? And then put my glasses down here and start talking like this. And start talking normally, and then so on and so forth as I go through all of my stuff. Suddenly get more and more exercised and more pissed until I'm talking about it. Okay, I won't. Susan and I, and by the way, Susan is a Democrat, right? She and I are looking at each other with Mark Levin as he slowly winds himself into this screaming screed of craziness, all right? But anyway, enough about shop talk. So Mark Levine said, kudos to J.D. Vance. That's actually a pretty good move if you believe in the political aspect of it. And once again, I'm differentiating what I'm doing. This is not a partisan broadcast. This is simply news. And the news is that J.D. Vance has decided to hold up many DOJ nominees in response to the Biden administration indictment of President Trump. In a press release, Vance said Trump is, quote, merely the latest victim of a Department of Justice that cares more about politics than law enforcement. Merrick Garland's department harasses Christians for pro-life advocacy, but also allows hardened criminals to walk our streets unpunished. This must stop, and I, this is JD Vance, will do anything in my ability to ensure it does. Beginning today, I will hold all Department of Justice nominations. If Merrick Garland wants to use these officials to harass Joe Biden's political opponents, we will grind his department to a halt. And I think that that is absolutely a very good political move. Do I agree with it? At some level, yes. Do I believe that this holds up the business of the people of the United States? Yes, I do. Do I believe that politics is detrimental to the greater good of the United States? It certainly is these days. And is this a political ploy? Of course it is. But what it does is it sends a message that I believe that many Americans want to send to the government of the United States. Knock off this political food fight and get back to the business of governing. What do you think? 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. That's our telephone number. Chat room is going. And coming up in just a couple of seconds, there's an article in the Federalist. We have for the last several days been talking about how the left is losing. People are beginning to notice that the left is losing. This is under the heading, be careful what you wish for, because when you get it, you might find out that people just don't agree. Once you get the people's attention, you suddenly know what the people are thinking. And I don't believe they're into this LGBTQRSTUVWXYZ situation. But we'll see. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being a part of it. Back with more coming up in just a moment. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. No, I haven't forgotten the slide. See, look, it's gone now. Welcome back to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We are watching what some people call the cratering of the left. And we've been reporting on it for the last several days. This is one of those things that really does happen in the United States. This is the idea that indeed the United States of America is, and at its very best, a self-correcting mechanism. The left has stepped into the fray on several different occasions and has, for whatever reason, trying to push this nation into a place most people don't want to go. They just don't want to go there. And in that blind chase toward a leftist agenda, I think the country is not served. Other people are noticing. And that notice is, not being lost. It is not being lost. The Federalist today, which is a decidedly conservative, therefore somewhat biased news organization, says it this way: support for gay marriage continues to climb steadily over time, according to Gallup survey data. Public support for transgendering seems to be cratering. A new Gallup poll out Monday, that's day before yesterday, reveals an overwhelming majority believe that biological sex should define participation in athletic competition. 69% of the 1,011 adults, a very small sample size. So remember, this is polling we're talking about here. Surveyed between May 1st through the 24th said athletes should only be allowed to compete on teams that match their birth gender. That's up from 62% just 2 years ago. 64% of participants who reported knowing a transgender person said sports leagues should be segregated based on sex. Another 55% of Americans told Gallup that it is morally wrong for individuals to attempt a gender transition. That's up from 51% in 2021. While 7 in 10 Democrats thought otherwise, A majority of Democrats, 48% to 47%, still believe biological males should stay out of women's sports and vice versa. Okay, it's polling information. It's suspect. But what does that say? Not just Republicans, but Democrats. And when this ridiculous circumstance, and I'm not talking about the people involved in it, I'm not talking about transgender persons being ridiculous. I'm talking about the concept of biological males competing with biological females. When you look at that on its face, it's ridiculous. And the solution is so simple. Simply do Title 10, Title 9, protected female sports from being left out of the financing pie. Well, by all means, do Title 10. That's not what it would be, by the way. But do a title that says that there should be money spent on transgender sports. Let them have at it. By all means. Who knows what would happen? A brand new set of records. A brand new creation of a sports pastime. Those people who support transgenderism, apparently above all else, would have a place to go to see their sports stars compete. Let them. By all means. That's how you do it. That's how you do it right there. Let's talk a little bit more about this article. The latest from Gallup corroborates several surveys showing Americans overwhelmingly oppose trans-identified athletes competing on teams of the other sex. In May, the Washington Post published its findings of a poll commissioned by the paper that revealed 57% believe that 57% of adults believe gender is determined at birth, compared to 43% who said gender is malleable. The same survey found 6 in 10 do not want men on women's sports teams. That's almost 2/3. Most Americans support anti-trans policies favored by the GOP, says the poll. The shift away from transgenderism comes as the pendulum swings and the culture wars towards conservatives' favor. More Gallup data published last week reveals social conservatism at its highest level in over a decade. And so there you have the latest of it. Now, this has also found its way into the corporate world. The corporate world is paying dearly for their LGBT-centered or catered advertising during Pride Month. Major brands have been pulling back. Successful boycotts of Target and Bud Light tanked corporate stock. Online LGBT influence complained to The Guardian about the decline of corporate pride revenue. Quote, I've spoken to a lot of my trans friends and colleagues, and we've all noticed less brands seeking partnerships and smaller budgets for prize campaigns. This according to Rose Montoya. And she says that's disappointing. But it is a fact of life. It is a fact of life. You know, this country is very, very careful about not damaging minority viewpoints, sometimes to the point of distraction. And that's what this is. This entire tempest in a teapot was highlighted when there's a pride flag between two American flags on the grounds of the White House, and a transgender female is wandering around topless. Seriously? The most disturbing part about that videotape was not necessarily the transgender woman walking around topless. It was the guy next to her jiggling his boobs. Seriously? On the grounds of the White House. It was so bad, even the White House pushed back on it. This is damaging to this movement. And instead of finding a solution that is simple, it's simple. They even have the people in Washington, D.C. to enact it. I mean, come on. This is simple. Just create transgender sports. Done. End of problem. Now, all these corporate entities, that call out their diversity models in their corporate structure, well, yeah, they're going to have to step up and support this entire movement. will they discover a return on their investment? So far, no. So far, no. Well, that is capitalism at its finest. People will vote with their pocketbooks. They'll vote with their feet. They will decide whether or not they're going to spend any time for this whatsoever. And either it will succeed or fail based on, here comes that word again, merit. It will succeed or fail on merit, just as it should. Just as it should in a free enterprise society. I want to thank the Federalist for letting us discuss that particular article. I appreciate that. That's a very good one. And once again, we make sure that we present the news. All right. So let's see what else is going on in that news. Let's. Oh yeah. Okay. Let me talk a little bit more shop talk in the minutes that we have left. Let's see. That's gone. Here we go. So President Biden is coming under scrutiny for what appears to be an influence peddling scheme, and that's a bad word, or an influence peddling allegation. Let's call it that. And there is very strong evidentiary circumstances that are at least talked about. The FBI 1023 that was kept hidden by the FBI until the Congress of the United States started talking about a subpoena for Christopher Wray. And then they turned over the 1023 with redactions that included a passage saying, oh, wait, there are 17 recordings, including 2 that were had between President Biden and the chief of Burisma at the time. Those were not in the 1023 given to the House of Representatives. Then Chuck Grassley of Iowa, the senator, stood up in the well of the Senate and pointed out this is a couple of things that are important. Thing number one, if this is unclassified, how come the American people can't read it today? That's a very good question. The other thing about it is this pointed to an FBI cover-up for Joe Biden. Everybody involved in it, everyone, needs to leave. Once again, if they want to play politics, that's fine. They can play politics all they want to. Run for school board, run for mayor, run for representative, run for senator, run for all of these offices. But stop being an FBI agent, because that's not the job of the FBI. The FBI is not to enforce politics. The job of the FBI is to enforce American law equally, blindly. Getting back to the shop talk part of this, ABC, CBS, NBC ignore any reporting on the Biden bribery allegations. Yet they spent hours on President Trump. This is something that President Trump talked about last night, but this is on the pages of Fox News. President Joe Biden, former President Donald Trump, both implicated in major breaking news stories on June 8th, but only the allegations against Trump received coverage by the big 3 news networks. This according to Media Research Center and a Newsbusters study. The analysis revealed that ABC, CBS, NBC devoted a total of 291 minutes to the Trump indictment between June 8th and June 12th. In the same period of time, those same networks gave 0 coverage to news that was only found on Fox News. Yow. President Biden was allegedly paid $5 million. You know the story by now. Now let's talk a little bit about Fox News and their coverage of Joe Biden. This was talking about people losing their jobs. If I had been in the editorial board of Fox News, I would have nailed the person responsible for this. And while I may or may not have fired them based on their particular attitude during my conversation with them, they certainly would be sanctioned in some way, shape, or form. Here's what happened. This is offshore, by the way. This comes from the London Daily Mail. Fox News called Joe Biden a, quote, wannabe dictator, unquote, who had his, quote, political rival arrested, unquote, as the president spoke at the White House following President Trump's court hearing on a federal indictment. The chyron at the end of the Fox News 8 p.m. hour, which was broadcasting Trump's speech following his not guilty plea, read, quote, wannabe dictator speaks at the White House after having his political rival arrested, unquote. That's misconduct. It's unprofessional. That's politics and news. That's the same kind of garbage that I have routinely criticized in the mainstream media. It's inexcusable. To call the President of the United States, regardless of who they are, a wannabe dictator, what possible good can that bring to the people of the United States? What possible good can that bring? The answer is none. It erodes the confidence in the government, already eroded enough, thank you very much. It erodes the prestige and the need for that prestige by sitting presidents. Not a president, not your favorite president, not someone else's favorite president, but the presidency itself. This is overt bias. Overt bias on the part of Fox News. Somebody needs to get their butt kicked. They absolutely do. That's just the bias that I keep pointing out when it comes to Fox News. See, this bias game is not just confined to the mainstream media. Although Fox News is part of the mainstream media, whether they want to admit it or not, they cannot fall into the trap being set. Now, is this a conscious trap being set by the mainstream media trying to push Fox News farther and farther right and more biased and blah, 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 blah? No. No, because the sociopaths involved in the mainstream media are simply focused on what they want. And that is a leftist America. Fox cannot fall, or any other so-called conservative media outlet cannot fall into that same bias trap, or they will have the same problems that leftist media sources have. And we, the people of the United States, will remain continually uninformed. This is the Wells Report. All right. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. The COVID era of the United States ushered in a way for American politicians to curtail constitutional rights. It happened at all levels of government: city, county, state, nation. This was something that most Americans will tolerate for a time based on what appears to be an emergency need. When COVID-19 came down the pike, I drew a contrast between COVID-19 and bird flu. They tried to turn bird flu into this gigantic disaster. There's only one problem. The only death that was involved in bird flu was the Aflac duck. Now, COVID-19 was different. And under the gun decisions are always flawed in some way, shape, or form. But the use of this emergency by politicians, again, at every level, was made plain to the people of the United States. And so, in order to push forward something that removes constraints put on government by the Constitution and Bill of Rights, well, all you really need is a good emergency. Rahm Emanuel of the Obama administration famously said, "Never let a crisis go unused, to go unexploited." Well, that cynical, nasty political statement will ring through history as someone tipping his cards. However, the idea that politicians can declare emergencies and move forward with an agenda that can't be legislated, can't be voted on, circumvents the Constitution and this constitutional republic remains. Out of the Hill today, progressive lawmakers are once again calling on President Joe Biden to declare a climate emergency, which would give him sweeping new executive powers to do pretty much whatever he wants. They're talking about getting rid of your gas stove, talking about getting rid of your air conditioning at some level, and talking about getting rid of your gas furnace. It's ridiculous. By the way, it's so ridiculous that Democrat Joe Manchin is saying, "I'm not going to take part in this craziness." And there you go, saying the quiet part out loud on the part of a real Democrat. This is craziness. It absolutely is. Well, the progressives are crazy, even though denigrating somebody else's mental capacity for the sake of politics is always flawed. It's also nasty. It's one more example about how progressives who are constantly lecturing the country about threats to democracy are eager to ignore democratically elected members of Congress and the U.S. Constitution in order to get their way. According to Bloomberg, which is not your most credible news source, quote, an emergency declaration by President Joe Biden would unlock sweeping executive powers, including blocking crude oil exports and placing other limits on fossil fuels. Do you want that? Do you want America to be hamstrung in the world oil market by not allowing American exports of oil? This is also kind of strange considering the Biden administration exported a whole bunch of oil to China out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Seriously? Yeah. The catalyst for the latest climate demand emergency was the Canadian wildfire smoke that settled on much of the Northeast, including New York City and Washington, D.C. Was that much of a big deal in Wyoming or North Dakota or any of those other places in the western Northwest? No. But it's because it's New York City and Washington, D.C., we have to do something. Progressives, according to the Hill article, don't need a catalyst. They just use that to get more media attention. They've been calling on President Biden to declare a climate emergency for at least a year. Last summer, several Democrats pressed President Biden to declare a climate emergency when it looked like the Inflation Reduction Act may not pass Congress. Once Senator Joe Manchin flipped and cut a deal with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the IRA passed in August. But that didn't stop calls for a climate emergency. Indeed, it energized them. Last October, 8 Senate Democrats urged President Biden to declare a climate emergency, even though the IRA had passed and the funds were flowing out. The senators asserted that while the IRA was helpful, it wasn't enough to reach President Biden's emission cuttings goals. Quote, "We will only achieve these if President Biden targets, the President Biden's targets, if you build off the momentum of the IRA with strong executive action. We urge you to take the important next step of declaring a climate emergency and unlocking the full tools at your disposal to address this crisis." I have news. This is not a crisis. Climate's doing just fine. Political exploitation of climate, sadly, is also doing fine, but not as well as its protagonists would want it to be. Sooner or later, this will change. The left is beginning to lose on many fronts. They're losing control of the schools. They're losing control of transgender politics. They're losing control of their corporate sponsors. This will spread throughout the country as people are tired of this constant hectoring by the left. At least I think so. Just my opinion. This has been the Wells Report. The executive producer of this broadcast is Dirk Steele. My name is John David Wells. See you again tomorrow. All righty then. Let's see. Isaac says, I'm being blocked from posting. I am being marginalized by multiple posts. Well, you're also being obnoxious, which is why I said something in the first place. You know, you cost us, by the way, Isaac, you cost us 2 people participating in the chat room. Okay? Now don't get me wrong, they were coming back at you. They were. But snarky crap is not what this chat room's for. As a matter of fact, I have a new rule for the chat room. Focus your commentary on me and the subject at hand. Focus your chat room responses on me, not your fellow chatters. Don't rise to the bait of somebody saying something snippy about you. But of course, if we just focus whatever you want to say on me, Chris Grimes does this, by the way. He doesn't come back at his fellow chatters as much as, say, Isaac does. But just focus it on me. Talk to me about this stuff. Resist the impulse to get into an argument on the chat room, and this will work fine. Okay? So there you go. I just want to point this out. It's like playing tennis. Okay? You take one ball, you hit it over the net, somebody else hits it back over the net. It's called a discussion. Right? If someone takes a ball and hits it over the net and then takes another one and hits it over the net and takes it over and so on and so forth, keeps doing that, the person on the other side can't play tennis. And therefore there is no tennis. It's just a silly game. Arguments are when both people are hitting tennis balls over the net at each other. Again, that's not what we're doing here. So stop it. Just stop it. Focus on the subject at hand. If you have a comment, focus on me. That's the new rule. Thanks very much for joining us. Otherwise, have yourself a great day. Now I have to get into the post-production meeting, which we call Post Toasties. We'll be back tomorrow. Have yourself a wonderful time, and thanks very much for watching this show. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, make sure you pass